Welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. We took Christmas off, the start of Hanukkah off. I don't celebrate Hanukkah, but I decided to take off at the start of Hanukkah too. Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa's in the second day. The winter solstice has ended. New Year's is on the horizon. And a new era of the Russ Joy Show is about to begin. And I'm going to break all of that down for you, as well as get into some of the most interesting things going on in both Philly sports and national, including but not limited to the following. And if you pay attention to the name of the episode or you pay attention to the thumbnail, you will have some idea. But we have Nick Sirianni got into it with Zach Ertz. John Tortorella apparently is eyeing up, could he be preparing to scratch Matvey Michkov as early as the game against the Ducks. Roro. The NFL and NBA are in the midst of a ratings war from Christmas Day. Oh, and by the way, the Philadelphia 76ers made an absolute statement on Christmas Day by taking down the Celtics in Boston. We're going to get to all that and more, but before we get there, I have to remind people, the drive to 500 may be over, but the giveaways are not. We are going to start to trudge our way to 1,000 subscribers on this here channel, The Russ Joy Show. And if you're watching on the Joy Media account, I love and appreciate you. But come on over to The Russ Joy Show. Subscribe there. And if you're a big podcast listener, you can go listen wherever you get your podcasts. That could be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, a lot of things have been going on, and we're going to get to all of them. But I want to remind the fine folks who are out there in whatever land, wherever you are, wherever you find the show. The drive to 500 may be over. Kevin Motz, I'm still waiting for you to reach out. Remember, you won the drive to 500. We announced that on Monday. You have until Sunday to claim. Otherwise, Monday's show is going to be a new drawing for the drive to 500 for the jersey giveaway winners. So, got to kind of keep an eye on that one. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. Kevin Motz, here. Time's yours, as Andy Reid used to say. But I'm going to get out to the comments here, and then we're going to dive into everything that's going on in Philly sports and beyond. The ratings war is actually very interesting to me between the NBA and NFL, so we're going to get there as well. But first, let's go out to the comments. Jay Grebby asks, does Torts bench Michkov against Cutter Gauthier tomorrow? Methinks it's a possibility. And if it happens, I would just about guarantee that Torts is going to say, oh, I didn't realize that Gauthier played for Anaheim. I didn't know. I don't pay attention to those things. Okay. I would not be surprised. Torts can't bench Michkov at home. We're going to get into that in a little bit. He can't bench him. He can't scratch him at home. But when they go on the road, he certainly can. Joe Papel says it's looking like the Flyers should have called Cutter's bluff and let him stay in college hockey till he grew up. Jamie Drysdale's value is dropping like a rock. He has no value. Jamie Drysdale has absolutely no value. Not on the trade market, not for this organization. They have to hope that he pulls the nose up on this thing at some point. Otherwise, it's bad, very bad. Michael Kolhowick. We've gone to him before. His question really should be Torts versus common sense. And by the way, the same people who were thinking he was great in November should realize Emil Andre was making Torts look great in November. And what does he do now? Oh, we're going to get into the Flyers talk. It has been interesting to see a 180 pivot based on some comments that Torts had about Michkov the other day. And a lot of the accounts that spend a lot of time kind of going to bat, defending each and every decision that John Tortorella makes. Some of those people all of a sudden have come around to, well, maybe he's not infallible after all, but we're going to get there. Don't worry. Lindy Joseph over on YouTube says there's fashionably late, and then there's Russ. Here's the thing, okay? It's an excuse, but it's kind of valid. There are 4 small children running around upstairs. And on the normal weeks, those kids are off to school and daycare. But things have been a little bit chaotic in the Joy household. Christmas, we like to kind of hold off. The kids they open their presents, but they don't open the boxes to all of the presents on Christmas Day. We like to do a little bit of an extended thing so that there's a little bit of newness every day and that it's not like, oh, you take something out, you play with it for a minute, and then you forget about it, and then you go on to the next thing. No, there's a little bit of method to the madness. So some of you might think that that's fair and unusual, or unfair and cruel and unusual punishment for kids, but I would tell you that it's certainly a good way to go about it. I would encourage it. Michael also says, and to never even think about pivoting and bringing back Fedotov into the mix and promote competition and accountability. We can't have that for goalies. We'll just stash 3. We're going to get there in a second. Joe Papel also says, Russ is watching Premier League Boxing Day highlights. I didn't watch any Boxing Day this year, which was kind of sad. I hunkered down. I did a lot of writing, did a lot of work for the day job, and I just didn't get to watch any of the games yesterday, which was kind of a bummer. Chris Freed about the delay between the normal show and this today says, what's 2.5 hours among friends? And that's exactly right. That's right. And Peter gets it, says RST, baby. That's Russ standard time. You can do RJT, Russ Joy time. Either's fine. Chris also asks, now that Christmas is over, is it better to sing Silent Night in German or English? I say German. It's just a nicer, some people just don't like, they just don't like the sound of German, but I think Stille Nacht is better. That's just me. Peter also shouts out the hoodie. Have you gotten to a Brew Through t-shirt? No, I have not. Although we had Brew Throughs in Pottsville, so they're not, and there's one in Phoenixville, or at least there used to be. I very rarely would hit a Brew Through, though. I find that to just be a little bit, I don't know, the prices are always inflated. It's just not my thing. But Peter, if you happen to own the Brew Through in Outer Banks, you let me know, and then we'll meet up next summer. Got to book that trip for our family. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Chris Freed calls out one of the things that we're going to get to, the immaturity of, is that Knuckly Sirianni is covered up when the Eagles win, but in a loss, watch out. Ford is here, tuned into Crossing Broadcast yesterday. I did not tune into the Crossing Broadcast yesterday. Kinker didn't even ping me about the show because I told him, we're at the point of time now where it's he and I have to decide if we're going to do that show together or not, because my work meeting schedule with some of the important companies that we work with falls during the time that we typically do Crossing Broadcast. So we got to make a decision for 2025. But Ford is here, and Ford, love and appreciate you for supporting the show. Fantastic. Ford also says, holiday break is outrageous. My kids have 9 days off consecutively. I've had numerous moments where I've said, oh, they go back Monday. Wait, nope, not till Thursday. If you have kids in Catholic school, the Catholic school people out there can attest to this. Those kids don't go back until the following Monday. So most of our kids are in public school, but our daughter is in Catholic school. Full day pre-K is fantastic. But she does, so I'm going to have 2 extra days with our daughter. Now, I love my daughter. My daughter used to be very good about, when daddy's doing a show or a meeting, we just leave him alone. And the last couple of times it's just been, she just busts in, and it's not great. But I love her, but it's not great. Let's see. Chris says, you need to break out your Karnak the Magnificent personal next week and make some wild 2025 predictions. I think what we're going to do on Monday is kind of the year that was in Philly sports. We'll do some highs, some lows. I'll probably ask the people out there for your thoughts, your highs and your lows for each team. If there was something from the national sports sphere that you found interesting. We are not going to talk about the election. So if you're oh, that was a super big high for me, it was a super big low for me. We're not doing that. We're not doing that at all. Tony Louis says, Russ looks jacked. That Planet Fitness membership paying dividends. You're right, Tony. Absolutely swole, jacked. I've now run into a few former students when I've been at the gym. And it happened 2 weeks ago. They're like, Hair Joy, is that you? I was like, yeah, that's me. And a lot of these kids that were in the last year when it was COVID, they were all still masked up. And a lot of them were still virtual or hybrid. So I don't really remember any of them. I conceptually I do, but I don't remember a face because there was no face because there was a mask like this. You could just see people by their eyes. And so I ran into a couple, and one was working out in Timberlands, which I don't understand. Whatever, live his best. Kid looks great. Looks like he's getting in good shape. Good for him. But I was I don't know what's good. I looked at the boots, and I was I don't understand what's happening. Then I ran into a former student at McGurk's in Royersford. He was a waiter. And he came over, and he's going to Westchester for finance, which is awesome. Good for him. He's do you remember me? I'm no, unfortunately I don't. And then he reminded me who he was. He was a kid who was hybrid and was never actually paying attention in class. And when the class would end, everybody would leave the virtual classroom, but this kid would always remain behind. So then I started telling his buddies yo, check his Xbox status. And if he's playing Call of Duty, homie's got to show up for class. Anyway, he seems to be doing well. These are the benefits when you're out of education. So you just kind of go hey, no hard feelings. I hope you're doing well. Kid's doing great. Everybody's happy. All right. Nico also checks in with a what up. Russ, Joe Papel asks, when do you do your airing of grievances with the family? We don't. There's no airing of grievances. Who needs a grievance to air? By the way, oh, look at this. Flyers spin doctor checks in. Don't worry. Maybe we'll start with the... do we start with the Flyers? No, but we will get to the Flyers. Eagles, Flyers, Sixers big win. NFL versus NBA, but I will get back to you, Flyers spin doctor. I will. I promise. You also might have noticed that there are a couple of new additions here to the desk. One, this beautiful on-air sign. My wife, she was like, we're going to get you some stuff for Christmas for the show and for the desk, which I appreciate. But this really was the big winner in the Joy household. Let me see. I can control this camera. So this, whoop, boop, 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 boop. Let's try to get it focused on this fella right here. I mean, this is pretty spot on. So my wife got me. Now, I've never wanted a Funko before. But she went and found, this ended up backwards. Who did such a thing? See, one of the kids must have messed with it. There we go. All right. Now we're better. Anyway, she got me this little guy. And it has two of my favorite things. It has my phone. And it has a cup of coffee. And it has a vest and jeans, white shoes. So she got it. She nailed it. So this is little Russ, who's now going to hang out on the desk in a permanent capacity on the on-air sign. So he's a new addition to the office. Chris Freed asks Nico is right. The rustache is there. That is correct. Chris asks, did your wife like her gift that she figured out a month ago? No, because I didn't get it for her. Now, that wasn't out of spite. I had in my mind this whole idea of how I was going to get it for her. And by the time I went to buy it, it was sold out. It's like back-ordered into January. So I pivoted. I did a very important thing. When you are a spouse, you have to pivot. When things aren't working the way they're supposed to, you pivot. When the item gets back-ordered, you go and you buy other things. And then you say, listen, that's just going to end up being a family gift in January when it comes in. I've already done the girl math on it. I know how it's going to work. So in January, the really big smart calendar thing that I was going to get her that she figured out, that's going to be in our house in January. But in the meantime, got her a whole bunch of other stuff because that's what you do. Reigning husband of the year in this house. That's how you do it, friends. Okay, let's get into some of the sports because there were a bunch of things that happened this week between Christmas Day on the national level and on the local level, and there have been some quotes floating around. I want to go back really quick because I don't want to turn this into a super big thing, but I do think it's important because Christmas Day, there were a lot of expectations around what was going to happen between the NFL and the NBA. And what we all know, right, just based on past precedent, is that the NBA was going to blow, or the NFL was going to blow the NBA out of the water. Like, we all knew it, right? The NFL is the big show in town. It is the behemoth in American sports. There is no league in this country that can compete with the NFL. It's an exercise in futility to even try. The real question was, all right, both games were on Netflix. How was Nielsen going to rate it? How was Nielsen going to figure out the amount of viewers? Was it going to just be shared data between Netflix and Nielsen? But we ended up getting the answer, and it pretty much confirmed what we imagined. So between the NFL and the NBA, the NFL averaged around 24 million viewers across both games. It peaked with 27 million in the Ravens-Texans game when Beyonce performed at halftime. But Chiefs-Steelers averaged 24.1 million viewers. Ravens-Texans was actually up a little bit, due in large part to the halftime show, 24.3 million viewers. Now, as we've discussed in the past on this show, the NBA for the longest time had a monopoly on Christmas. It was their thing. It was their big tentpole event. It was the day that everyone just got used to the 5 back-to-back games, and basketball and Christmas were synonymous with one another. And then the NFL said, oh, that seems like a good time to take over another holiday. Thanksgiving's not enough. Let's go get Christmas too. And so the NFL last year blew the NBA out of the water. They had 3 games. This year they went down to 2. And a lot of people, a lot of football fans were left wondering, like, why wasn't there a primetime game? That seems weird. Here's the breakdown on the NBA ratings, and we're going to talk about a little bit of misleading data that came out of Christmas Day. Knicks Spurs was the noon tip-off. That was 4.9 viewers, or 4.9 million on average. Celtics Sixers was up a little bit, 5.1 million viewers on average. Timberwolves Mavericks dipped, 4.3 million on average. Lakers Warriors jumped up in a big way, 7.7 million viewers. And then the final game of the night, which I think had about a 10:30 tip-off, was Nuggets Suns, 3.8 million viewers. Here's the thing. The NBA then ran out, and ESPN ran out, and they touted the fact that viewership on Christmas Day was up. I think they said 84% year over year. What they failed to point out is two things. Last year, the primetime game was Sixers Heat. That was on ESPN only, not ABC. The NBA did a very smart thing this year, and ESPN. They did a smart thing. The NBA said, we're going to have these games on ESPN and ABC. Why? ABC is available in far more homes than the cable network ESPN is. You could practically guarantee yourself an extra 500,000, million, maybe even 2 million viewers on aggregate just because of how readily available ABC is. You don't need to have cable. If you're still an antenna viewer, you can still get it. If you're a cord cutter, in a lot of cases, you can still find ABC even without having to pay for like a YouTube TV or a Hulu Plus. Like, it's there, okay? So, slightly misleading because it was ESPN versus ESPN and ABC year over year. And the other very misleading part of it is that they held off that Lakers-Warriors game for the primetime slot, but what wasn't happening at the same time? The NFL. Because the NFL ran two games. One was around noon, one was around 4. They didn't run head-to-head. The primetime game last year, Sixers Heat, I think it was Sixers Heat last year. That game ran up against another NFL game, and again, was only on ESPN. This year, they had Warriors-Lakers on ESPN and ABC, no opposition from football. So they did something where they tried to make it look like the numbers were up significantly, because in theory and in actuality, they were, but context is pretty important here. And the NFL wasn't running a third game. If they had, it would have blown the NBA out of the water. And this is from somebody who loves basketball and will happily sit down and watch any matchup, practically, put a little caveat, practically any NBA game that's on Christmas, because it's a tradition. Now, did I go back and forth between the NBA and the NBA, or the NFL and NBA? I did, right? Like, I started with the games on Netflix. I saw that the Chiefs game was going to end up being a blowout, so we flipped on to the NBA at halftime. We kept it there. We came back for like the fourth quarter, saw that it was still going to be a lopsided game. The Steelers had no chance to come back. We went back to the NBA. We watched the Sixers game in its entirety. We had a second screen up for a little bit for the Texans-Ravens game, but I just kind of knew that with Tank Dell going out with his knee going kablam last week, tore 3 ligaments in his knee, the Texans weren't going to look particularly good. They were probably going to look deflated and come out flat. They did. It was a blowout. They put up 2 points on Christmas Day. Now, if you want to make the argument that it's silly to look at ratings because the NBA games were better overall and were more competitive overall, you could certainly do that. And I will now welcome people into the kind of nonsense and the nonsensical discourse that's had about ratings. Do ratings affect your experience as a viewer? If you're a basketball fan, does the fact that the NBA got like 5x'd by the NFL in some games, does that affect your ability to enjoy the NBA on Christmas? The answer is probably no. If you're somebody who sits back and says, you know what, the thing that I care about the most is the ratings. I can't enjoy anything unless the ratings are in line with what I think I saw. That's a problem. I say this because in pro wrestling, there's always this, AEW had a down show, the rating was low. That means it sucked. Not necessarily. It could still be a really good show. It just means that people aren't watching. Cable is down. We heard this with the NBA this year. The cable subscriber base is down. There are more cord cutters. Those numbers have gone down. Uh-oh, there we go. I was frozen for a second. Oh, that was almost bad. We can't have that. No freezing today. Okay. But like it shouldn't affect how you feel as a sports fan. It really shouldn't. And if you're a huge football fan, whether they had 24 million on average or they had 10 million on average, it shouldn't affect whether or not you enjoyed the football. Now, in fairness, the NFL games really weren't that close. The Steelers game was somewhat close, at least early, but it fell apart. And the second game, Ravens-Texans, was never even remotely close. So if you're going for competitiveness, even if you don't like the NBA product, the NBA games were more competitive. And that Sixers-Celtics game that popped the biggest number of the three earlier games that ran head-to-head with the NFL, that game was fantastic. That game, if we want to pivot a little bit, was a statement game by the Sixers because there you are in a situation where the Sixers finally get Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey on the court at the same time. They start the game together, they end the game together. Now, in warmups, Embiid taking some shots, trips over a stanchion, right? And he falls backwards, and he doesn't get up, and there are all these rumors about how he's not going to play. Listen, they're going to do whatever they can to get Joel Embiid to play on Christmas Day. You want to know why Joel Embiid didn't get suspended for chasing down a lady ref, which we can have a separate conversation about whether or not a female ref versus a male ref should be treated differently. Is it equality? Is it unequal to, defend the female ref more than you would defend Joel Embiid going after Scott Foster? I don't know. That's not our place today to have that argument. But I will just point out, there was no chance, unless he punched the ref in the face, that they were going to suspend him for Christmas Day. There's just no chance. So the Sixers go into Boston, which has been their ultimate kryptonite, right? Boston has had the Sixers' number in every way, right? The Sixers never look particularly competitive. Now, against Boston. Now, this game had plenty of ups and downs. It had plenty of lead changes. It had plenty of runs. It made you think, oh no, it's happening again. Sixers are up big with 3.5 minutes left in the game. You get a Jaylen Brown off-balance three. You get a few turnovers between Tyrese Maxey. There's a moment where Joel Embiid's handling the ball at half court, and you're like, what the hell's that? And he turns it over. And so all of a sudden, Boston gets back into the game. But ultimately, the Sixers find some gumption, and they find something within themselves, and they get over the hump. Tyrese Maxey has a fantastic game. Embiid has a strong enough game, and quite frankly, Boston has no one that they can match up against Joel Embiid. We know this. The question will be, if you have to face them in the postseason, will the disparity in talent between Embiid and whatever big Boston wants to try to line up across from him, will that have the same impact? Will the Sixers be able to keep Embiid healthy or get him into that series healthy and get him through the series healthy? If so, it could actually be a much more competitive game than you expect. Here's the big positive takeaway, if you want, okay? Maxey has had some good games of late. The one thing that you look at in that game against Boston is kind of twofold. It's two role players. Yabusele has been very good for the Sixers this year. He could be an X factor, but Caleb Martin in that game had the game of his life, right? Caleb Martin did exactly what you need a good role player to do. He took a ton of pressure off the stars. Most notably, he was able to perform in a way that you would have hoped Paul George would have, and kind of gets, not that Paul George gets off the hook, and it's not that Paul George had a horrific game. It's just that, we have to be fair here. It wasn't a particularly inspiring game. It wasn't a transcendent game from Paul George, but Caleb Martin picked up the slack. Now, one thing that I find to be a real big positive of this Sixers team as they kind of try to put everything back together and not fall apart and get through some of these real rough initial stages, especially around Embiid's injury, Embiid and Marcus Hayes, losing Jared McCain, who looked like a really good up-and-coming rookie, potential Rookie of the Year candidate. He's probably out for the year, or at least that's what it sounds like. No one has confirmed it yet. It looks like he will probably miss, if not the entire season, a good chunk of it. There's something about hatred in your heart for the opponent. There's something about what happened after the Sixers-Celtics game that made me and made the cockles of my heart nice and warm. It brought a warm fuzziness deep down to my tum-tum because Joel Embiid was asked about Caleb Martin's game. And Embiid had something to say in it. It it had some it was rooted in hatred. And I want to throw out to, this was Kai Carlin who had the quote here. The audio's a little bit low, but we'll talk about it in a second. But here's Joel Embiid on Caleb Martin's big game and why he succeeded the way that he did.
Yo, you mentioned Caleb. I mean, listen, that's a career high for him in threes with 7. Just what did you kind of just see from him from an overall perspective today?
He's playing against Boston, so they sent us much higher, so I guess I'll take it.
That's the part. Now, again, I know that it's low. You might not have been able to hear it, but I can't do much with the audio there. He says he knew he was playing Boston and he hates them as much as I do. Call it what you want, right? There are old heads and some people, even like me, who say, like, I get it. Players don't have the same kind of loyalty to the team or the fan base as they might have in the past. And perhaps there's been a loss of competition because you see guys after games just going up and kind of bro hugging it out. Sometimes you see it pregame. And like there was a time where players from rival teams didn't bro it up before or after the game. They actively went out and tried to destroy one another on the court, on the ice, on the field. And that has changed in the last, let's say, decade. And if you want to even like limit it to the last like 5-6 years, you can do that as well. But knowing that Embiid hates Boston is one thing. Caleb Martin, who has performed very well against the Celtics and did when he was a member of the Heat, knowing that they have that hatred for this rival that has absolutely had the Sixers number year after year after year, something about that is comforting. Because if these teams were to run into each other in the postseason, and if these teams were healthy, Boston is still a better overall team. But the hatred that Joel Embiid and Caleb Martin and perhaps a Tyrese Maxey could have. We don't know if Tyrese Maxey seems like a very positive guy. I don't know if he hates anybody. But if he does, I hope it's Boston. Knowing that there's that extra little bit of fuel to kind of push you over the top, sometimes that's what you need. And sometimes that's what a team that isn't quite as good overall as its opposition needs. They need that extra motivation. They need that disdain, that hatred for the opposition to push them over the top. Now, listen, we could have had a very different conversation if Boston had come back in the way that they almost did have a comeback in this game. If Boston had come back to win that one, it would have been another one of those. So here it goes again for the Sixers. Here we go again. Now, was it a great ending of the game? No, not at all. Those last 3 minutes were just heartburn galore, right? Like I was getting the Pepto ready. I felt the spirit of my Baba during that game. I felt the anger that she would have felt watching the Sixers collapse against Boston on Christmas Day. You're going to collapse on Christmas Day. And yet they found a way to win. And like I said before, the thing that is maybe the most positive, the most encouraging is that this wasn't a game where all three of your big three had a standout lights out performance. Maxey, very good. Embiid, solid. Paul George, not as much. Not impactful. They're still kind of figuring this thing out together. I am not alarmed by Paul George's play to this point this season. We have to remember there was the injury in the preseason. There was a ramping up that had to kind of happen. They're going to kind of load manage him. If you can get these three on the court somewhat consistently from now until the postseason and enter the postseason with them healthy, and they can build some kind of cohesion and chemistry, that Paul George is able to create his own shots. He's able to hit shots when he's set up for them in the corner, whatever it is. This team could be very good. This team could actually be a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference. Now, am I overreacting positively because they beat Boston? Maybe. But you started to see the vision of putting those three guys together. And what have I said all season? They constructed a roster that has a lot of role players who have a very specific skill set. But those skill sets only work if their big three are in the lineup. And if not, those guys don't have the ability to go above and beyond. They don't have the ability to, over an extended period of time, you can't rely on Caleb Martin and Kyle Lowry and Gordon and Drummond to all of a sudden make you 5 wins better than you should be. Those guys have very distinct roles. Caleb Martin, tip of the cap to you. That was one hell of a performance. Career high 7 3-pointers made. Excellent stuff. Now I have not looked at the comments yet. But I have to imagine that there are some people who might feel like, oh, you can't buy into the Sixers yet. I mean, I can. Because as we know, the one team I can't be objective about in the city is the Sixers. I will try, but we'll see. All right. Chris Freed notes, NBA on Christmas was once a mighty oak. Now it is a withering vine. It's kind of sad. It is kind of sad. JH says, really happy to tune in and see the Russ and Beaver cam still going strong. We got one. We got two now. Buck Cracker over here is going to go in a box, going to go back in his box, and he's going to join the rest of the Christmas decorations at some point. JH asks, did what's-his-name claim his jersey? Kevin Motz did not yet claim it. If he doesn't claim it by Sunday, we're doing a redrawing on Monday. I might actually go crazier. I might say that if we do a redrawing on Monday, and then after that week no one takes it, then I might limit it to only people who are present in the chat for like the third drawing, which would be the second redrawing. I got to give this jersey away. Like, we got to do this, you know? I want to do it before the end of the year. All right. Peter over on YouTube says, give me college basketball over the NBA any day of the week and twice on Sunday. I hate college. I don't like college basketball. I don't really like college football. College football in the playoff, I'm here for. Random regular season college football game. Do I need to watch Penn State go up against like South Dakota prep school? No, I don't. I don't find that intriguing at all. Now, when it's like two real big SEC powerhouse schools in the regular season, I'll watch that. But like, you can't pay me enough money. Well, maybe you could. But like, for the most part, you can't pay me enough money to like tune into a regular game between a top 25 team and just some scrubs. I just don't see it. Genuinely, I don't get it at all. Let's see. Flyer Spin Doctor says Celtics and Crosby torturing Philly fans for decades. Shaking hands. Yeah. I can at least respect Crosby, though. I might not like Crosby, right? Crosby might have given some really bad memories to a lot of Flyers fans, but like, I can respect the greatness of Crosby. I don't respect the Celtics. I think last year's title was a fluke. I'm not a big Tatum guy. Not a big Brown believer. Horford's a fraud. Whatever. Let's see. I think Didi was responding to the idea of the viewers only, the live viewers only drawing. And Lantros too says, present. So here we are. Didi says, hope remains for my Pelly Lindbergh jersey. All right. Flyer Spin Doctor says, problem with the NBA and specifically Joel is he said regular season doesn't matter, but for the first third of the season, it's like he went too far and not going for his own numbers and had him checked out. Yeah, I don't know. The NBA has a lot of problems. They do. But like I said, they gave out some like really misleading data on viewer numbers relative to last year. Like there was no context to it. So it's like the numbers you put out are true, but the context would otherwise reveal that like last year you were going up against the NFL for 3 games. You only went up twice against 2 games this year. And your primetime game was unopposed. And you were using ABC to boost the numbers. Whatever. Okay, so that part's done. Now, that's one thing that happened in Philadelphia. And we are going to get to the Flyers here in a minute. But first, I want to get to something that there always just has to be residual fallout. Because you can't just have an Eagles game where you feel good about things and you want to just move forward. Like, let's turn the page. Let's look ahead to Dallas. There are rumors flying that Kenny Pickett's going to start on Sunday. Commanders fans have now convinced themselves that the Eagles are going to lose their final 2 games. Commanders are going to win their final 2 games. And now they think they're going to win the NFC East. And it's a whole thing. It's not going to happen. But the commies fans, they have a really hard time with things. And it's very hard for them to understand stuff. I don't know why it is. But it is. Nick Sirianni got into it with Zach Ertz on after their last game. And it was a moment that should not have happened. And it is once again one of those things where you have to ask yourself, why does Nick Sirianni feel the need to act this way? So there was a report that came out that there had been a confrontation, we'll say, between Nick Sirianni and Zach Ertz. Now, there has been some unearthed footage of what may have led to the angry back and forth. So first, I'm going to show you, because I think it's important, let's see what Zach Ertz and Nick Sirianni did on the sideline. Or, sorry, sort of sideline, on the field, after the game. Commanders complete the comeback. We discuss this in detail on Monday's show. But I want you to see what happened on the field between Sirianni and Zach Ertz. Now, the person who put this video up, they highlight Zach Ertz. So you'll see him off to the right. It's kind of blurry. Looks like Ertz initially goes in for a handshake. There he is. He goes in for a handshake with Sirianni. It doesn't look like Sirianni's going to do it, so Ertz goes for a high five. Then he comes in for the handshake. You can see Ertz keeps walking. Sirianni turns, appears to say something, so Ertz turns around and looks back at him. Big Dom is over here. Big Dom always has to, be with Sirianni in case he gets himself into trouble. So now the camera's going to kind of move around here. You can see Sirianni said something. And now as the camera kind of pans away, you can see Ertz over here turn more to walk back towards Sirianni. Now here's the handshake in midfield between Quinn and Sirianni, Big Dom. And now you can see over here, Ertz has now brought himself back into the picture. He confronts Sirianni. There's clearly something that was said that didn't sit well. So now the camera, I don't know why we go to Big Dom and Quinn, but they did. And now you can see Ertz and Sirianni are still talking as they walk off the field. Big Dom is there. And I think what you could see there at the very last second is and now there's a camera here, right? There's an actual camera here. And we don't have the up close. We have this other angle. I don't know why it didn't, but look at Big Dom's hand right there. Big Dom DeSandro has the hand on Ertz. We saw Ertz and Sirianni walking towards each other, then walking alongside. I don't think this is hey there, fella. Hey there, fella. How you doing? Good game out there. That looks like there was something going on between Ertz and Sirianni, and Big Dom had to insert himself into the situation and break it up. Now, does it matter in the grand scheme of things? No. Is it stupid? Yes. Why is Nick Sirianni potentially trash-talking Zach Ertz after the game? And how do we even know that it was trash-talking in the first place, Russ? What are you talking about? Where did that even come from? How do you ascertain that from a blurry video that's really not fully in view? Well, because Jeff McClain over on Uncovering the Birds had a report. Now, I'm going to try to scrub through this, and I'm actually going to increase the speed. Now, if playback speeds over 1 make you uncomfortable, I'm going to go to 1.5 speed. Now, I would rather listen to this on 2.5 speed. But I want you to hear what Jeff McClain reported about the interaction between Sirianni and Ertz and why this maybe got a little bit uglier and why Big Dom DeSandro had to get involved. Now, again, this is at 1.5 speed, and so if it bothers you, I'm sorry, but you can always toggle on YouTube or on your podcast app to slow it down. All right, here we go. Let's hear what happened exactly between Sirianni and Ertz, and why was it such a big deal?
The bad blood was on display during the game and after. Oddly enough, between Sirianni and former Eagles tight end Zach Ertz. The two had to be separated during post-game handshake. Sirianni didn't have much to say about it after the game.
What's the nature of the interaction with Zach Ertz after the game? It looked like he was pretty...
Just like, congrats both of us, congrats to each other.
Ertz told an Inquirer reporter, "I'll let him comment on what was said. To me, we just exchanged holiday pleasantries and kept it moving."
Do you believe
But according
that?
to sources close to the incident, here's what really happened. Ertz went to shake Sirianni's hand, could tell the coach was agitated, so instead gave him a high five. Sirianni didn't like the intensity.
So Ertz saw that Sirianni was pissed, understands how Sirianni works, goes for a high five. And now, what's the thing that set off Sirianni? Oh, boy.
Sirianni didn't like the intensity of Ertz's hand slap and mocked him because he had only one catch and told him he essentially did nothing to contribute to the Commanders' win.
Okay, now hold on a second. So you're telling me that Ertz goes up to Sirianni, sees that he's pissed, instead of going for the handshake, goes for a high five, wants to just kind of move on. And then you saw in the video, he kind of went from high five and maybe kind of slapped into the handshake. And that Sirianni was pissed about the intensity of the handshake or the intensity of the high five. That was enough to piss off Nick Sirianni. You're going a little bit too hot. You're getting a little bit too worked up. Bada boom. And then says, yeah, well, you only had one catch. You didn't really help the commies win. I mean, I don't know. That kind of feels like scorn lover, doesn't it? Like, not exactly ideal. All right, let's keep going.
Ertz took exception and got in Sirianni's face. But the coach's escort, as always, Dom DeSandro, jumped in and held Ertz back.
We did see that. We saw the hand on the shoulder, so there seems to be some veracity to that report.
And ushered a defeated Sirianni to the tunnel. Sirianni later called Ertz and apologized over a Zoom conference call, sources said. The former Eagles tight end played for the coach in his first year in Philadelphia before getting traded to the Cardinals mid-season. Publicly, Ertz and Sirianni were complimentary of each other after their short stint together in 2021.
So, was this just a big miscommunication? And was that a situation where, like, the Inquirer, I don't know, is trying to make an innocuous thing into a big salacious scandal? I don't know. Here's the thing, though. Like, if you're Sirianni, you just can't. There's the thing about, like, in the heat of the moment, we talked about A.J. Brown when he said the passing thing, that there might have been the fire still going in his gut, and maybe you need a little bit more time in between the game and meeting with the media. They have a prior relationship, even if it was for only an off season, the first half of a season before Ertz got traded. This kind of thing just shouldn't happen. Like, it's just another one of those, like, bad looks. Well, since then, Zach Ertz has met with the media, and he gave the commies media just a general overview of what happened and whether or not it was as serious as it looked. Because, again, this whole thing sort of blew up again. And so here's Zach Ertz. I believe this was on Thursday at the commies facility. And here is what he had to say about Nick Sirianni and that thing that's been reported.
I'm not really going to get into the specifics, but just two people that really love to compete, I would say. Nick and I had a great relationship when I was there. We still have a great relationship. And I think it's definitely been blown away out of proportion. We spoke, we're good. There's no ill feelings on my part, and I don't think there's any ill feelings on his part. It's just something in the heat of the moment probably got blown out of proportion. It may be misunderstanding, but at the end of the day, him and I are fine. Everyone knows how I feel about that place and that building. But at the same time, I love being here. And so everything is getting blown away out of proportion.
Good, classy response from Zach Ertz, kind of what you would expect. Again, is it just the heat of the moment? Probably. Is it something that your head coach should really be doing? Like, assuming that report was true, like, is that what you really should be doing? Is it like you get pissed off because of the intensity and the handshake or the high five, and then you're like, yeah, well, you only had one catch. Like, really? Come on, man. Yeah, I hope that's not true, but if it is, it's like, come on. It really does feel like scorned lover kind of crap. Like, what are we doing? You know? All right. I'm going to go out to the comments, and then we're going to move on to this Torts Michkov thing, and then I have something else that I want to tell all of you before we head out here. Let's get over here. Ford says Crossing Broad has an article out right now saying the whole thing is a huge nothing burger. I am shocked that Kincaid would take the stance of it's a nothing burger, total nothing burger. Okay, I see some people going back and forth about the giveaway. They want only the people who are in the live chat on Monday to be considered for the giveaway. That would be for the second redrawing, not for Monday if we have to do a redrawing. Chris Reed with a really good question here, though. How safe is Sirianni's job? Record would say he's safe. His actions, on the other hand, make it impossible to see him taken out behind NovaCare and given the old Yeller treatment in January. I don't see a way that Sirianni is let go at the end of the year. Unless there is a cataclysmic collapse here, which there can't be. There's only 2 games left. And then you go on to the postseason. I don't see a scenario where the Eagles fall apart in a way that it just becomes abundantly clear that Sirianni was to blame for last year's collapse and to blame for discord in the locker room to end this year. I just don't see it. Now, if they make the playoffs and they get blown out in the wild card round or something, then maybe it's a conversation. But then again, what are you going to do? It seems like Vic Fangio is working out really well on the defensive side of the ball. It looks like Kellen Moore is finding his way with the weapons that they have available on offense. So I just have a lot of questions about, like, what exactly do you need to see if you're an Eagles fan for you to say, like, hey, Sirianni's safe, or Sirianni has to go? Like, what does that even look like? And by the way, like, the guy that, you know, people like me were like, oh, it'd be a pretty interesting thing, was like Belichick. Well, he's going off to North Carolina. He does have an opt-out that he can get out of that contract if an NFL job comes a-knocking in the next few months. But he's likely off the table. Are you going to go after Vrabel? I mean, Vrabel's a really good coach, but I don't see it. I think that at this point, he's done enough winning. The front office and ownership will take a look at the bounce back from last year. They'll look at the adjustments made in the bye week. They'll look at the long win streak up until the Commanders game, and they'll probably tell themselves, like, he's still a really good coach. Now, again, what he does exactly and how much influence he has over the defense or the offense or anything else, I have no idea. And probably the only people who would know are the ones who are in the player meetings are the ones who are in the team meetings. Maybe some of the beat guys, if they've been given some behind-the-scenes knowledge from players that trust them. But like to this point, the guy wins. I don't necessarily like the antics, but they've been winning. It's hard to argue when you've been as successful as he's been to start his career with the Eagles. Kevin at iRock Philly says, if Sirianni wins the Super Bowl, Philly fans will view Nick as our lovable, crazy coach. If he loses, they'll say, get rid of the stupid MFer. I think you're right. I think it really is that big of a pendulum swing. Like, I don't think that there are people who are really in the middle on Sirianni. I think you either really like him or you really hate him. And I think that, like, again, if he wins, right, if the Eagles were to go on and win a Super Bowl with Sirianni, he will be beloved. That doesn't mean that he's going to have, like, the longest runway in the world. Like, the Eagles got rid of Doug Peterson shortly after he won them their first ever Super Bowl. Now, there might have been some other things going on in the background that led to that firing as well. Sirianni might have a little bit of a longer leash. I just don't know. Okay. Last thing. So we talked about the NFL versus NBA. We talked about the Sixers. We talked about the Eagles issue. I want to get to Tortorella really quick because there was something that came up with John Tortorella and Matvei Michkov that I found like at least slightly concerning. And I'm not surprised by it, but it's like, what are we doing here? All right, Matvei Michkov has been a real bright spot for the Flyers. We all knew that. He came over early, 2 years earlier than expected. He's a guy that this team views as a fundamental, core piece, franchise cornerstone type player. The coach has benched him. The coach has scratched him for a few games. He doesn't do it at home. Why doesn't he do it at home? It's because John Tortorella thinks that Matvei Michkov doesn't deserve to sit at home? No, it's probably because if ownership or the front office has actually like succeeded at conveying one message, it's people in Philadelphia who bought tickets to games are here to watch Matvei Michkov. They're not here to see Garnet Hathaway or Ryan Poehling or whichever one of the goalies decides to give up way too many goals at this point, whether it's Ertz or Kolosov. Fedotov doesn't even get to play, but he's still up here. But, like, the people are buying tickets to see Matvei Michkov. You can't sit him. Well, the Flyers play the Ducks on Saturday. And there is a non-zero chance that Tortorella could scratch Michkov from that game against Cutter Gauthier, which would be brutal, absolutely horrific if they were to bench him. And I joked at the start of the show, but, like, Torts, when he typically benches a guy or scratches a guy in front of, like, their home crowd, right, in front of their friends and family in their hometown. Torts likes to do the whole thing. Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize it, which is bullshit. I would not be surprised if Tortorella scratches Michkov against Gauthier. Now, would it be a big win for the Flyers organization if Michkov goes out and puts up a 2 or 3 point night against the Ducks in Anaheim and Gauthier gets shut out, puts nothing up on the board? Yes, that'd be a big win, which is why maybe tomorrow's not the game that they sit in, because it is a big win optically if Michkov looks better than Gauthier. The other side of that, though, is they weren't traded for each other. Drysdale was the guy that you got back, and Drysdale has looked largely awful. Start of the season, he looked awful. He had a few good games when he first came off of IR a couple weeks ago. Has gone back to looking mostly bad. Not much of an impact. But the reason that I bring this up, and the reason that I feel like we are heading towards Tortorella scratching Michkov once again, is because Tortorella, prior to Christmas, said something that made me go, it's not great. Tortorella's kind of calling out Michkov. He's kind of putting a lot of the blame here on this bullshit power play not working. He's kind of putting it on the young guy again. It doesn't feel like a good thing. What are we doing, John? So I want to go to Jackie Spiegel's the one, friend of the Press Row Show and Snow the Goalie. She had this quote a few days ago, before Christmas. I think this was on Monday. This is what Tortorella had to say about Michkov. Asked about the Flyers' power play struggles, and part of Tortorella's response focused on Matvei Michkov. Here's what it was. He said, Mitch has leveled off. Mitch's game has leveled off. It's been a little bit of a struggle with him. He was very important. He was a very important part of giving us some life on that power play. That's the first part. Now, it did get worse because Torts is Torts. So Jackie, I guess, followed up with Tortorella, asking if it's because teams are playing better against Michkov defensively on the power play. Obviously with the idea that, like, he is their most dangerous guy on the power play. And in fairness, is like their most dangerous guy on the team, although at even strength, he's not quite as dominant. He says the following. Maybe, I don't know. I think it's been a little bit of a struggle for him. It's the National Hockey League. He still has a ton to learn as far as what it takes to play through a schedule. We've had a really hard schedule, and I don't think he's used to that. I'm really happy with how much we've gotten from him already in the first 35 here. We figured there'd be dips along the way with such a long schedule and travel and the nature of the National Hockey League. I think he's handled it really well, but I think it's a little bit of a dip right now. Now, there's a little bit of a positive in there, but the negative is if he's saying that like the kid can't compete night in and night out or that he's not used to the schedule, then what's the coach going to do? He's going to bench him. He's going to scratch him. He's going to say he's not used to this. We think his efficacy has dropped. And the thing that he said about the power play, he kind of like hones in on Michkov that like, oh, well, Michkov was really helping us early on, but now what is he exactly? I mean, guys, like, what are we doing here? I keep coming back to this, and this is why I get frustrated. This is what gets me the angriest about Tortorella and Michkov and the dynamic. There is a part of me that wants to believe that like Tortorella knows this guy is the golden goose. He's going to coach him hard, and ultimately that might help his development. But like, you can't play mind games with the kid who's the franchise cornerstone. You just can't. And you can't blame the 19, now 20-year-old for the drop-off of the power play. Rocky Thompson has been in charge of this power play unit for years, and it has been a dog shit, bottom-of-the-barrel kind of power play unit. And in most cities, a head coach would have moved on from that person. They would have put a different assistant coach in charge of the power play. They might have actually fired an assistant coach and brought someone else in to rework it. Now, you could also have the thing where you say, well, Russ, is this just a situation where the Flyers don't have a lot of talent and that's why the power play is so ineffective? Yeah, there's like a little bit of that. But like, you did just extend Travis Konechny to a lot of money. That's one guy who should be performing on the power play. Travis Sanheim, sure, it was by Chuck Fletcher, but like was given a lot of money to be a quarterback on that power play unit. You went and traded Cutter Gauthier, your best domestic player, your best domestic prospect. You traded that guy for Jamie Drysdale, who was also supposed to come in and be able to be a quarterback on the power play unit. And that hasn't worked. So is it that all these players are failures, or is it that systemically what is being installed by the assistant coach who runs the power play just doesn't work? These are questions that I have, just in general. And nobody seems to be able to answer them, because I think what's happening here is you're seeing the head coach sticking up for his assistant coach that he's just unwilling to move off of for whatever reason. And the easiest thing to do is to point at the guy who at 19 years of age, now 20, like recently turned 20, has cooled off. And that other teams are now starting to account for Matvei Michkov, where they weren't in the beginning of the year because he was a rookie and maybe it was beginner's luck. Now they're starting to actually plan against Michkov and his efficiency on the power play and how many points he's putting up has dipped a bit. That's it. Like, that to me is a concern. It should be a concern to you as well. So if you're a Flyers fan, this sure as shit better not go the wrong way. If you're a Flyers fan, this like little power struggle that you're going through as a team between the star player going forward and the head coach who won a cup 2 decades ago, this can't continue. And I've now started to see the discourse online that would certainly kind of point you in the direction that some of Tortorella's biggest supporters in the fan base have now started to say, maybe he's not the right guy to coach this kid. Maybe the head games aren't something you should play with the future cornerstone of the team for the next decade. Like, maybe that guy, maybe that's the one that you don't play head games with. Maybe you do that with Scott Lawton, who's a bottom 6 forward. Maybe you do that with Morgan Frost, who you think is ultimately going to be part of a hockey trade, a 1-for-1 trade for a change of scenery guy like a Shane Wright. But you don't do that with the franchise cornerstone. You don't do that with the kid that your organization bent over backwards to go pick up from the airport when he came over 2 years early. Who, like, they've included on all of the branding and all of the advertising around the team this season. Maybe that's the one guy you don't play the mind games with. When the Torts apologists are now starting to come around to like, hey, this isn't great. Tortorella has 1 year left on the contract after this year. Who's going to be here longer? I don't know. Let's think. Could it be Matvei Michkov, who is the centerpiece of the team? Or could it be John Tortorella, who's gotten older and again hasn't won jack shit in 2 decades? I don't know. Who do you think is going to be here longer? Who's ultimately more important to this franchise going forward? And I've seen a bunch of people who have now touted this idea. They've trotted this line out there. Oh, well, the culture is important. The culture, blah, culture. Because look what's happening with the Rangers. They're a really talented team. Is Lavi wearing out his welcome? Blah, 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 blah. The culture. The culture's fine, and you can make the culture argument. But, if a lot of the team that's here isn't going to be here when you flip the switch, then I don't know how much the culture really matters. You don't want to instill a losing culture, but do you really need John Tortorella at this point playing mind games with your best prospect in decades? Do you really need that? Is it going to long-term help Matvei Michkov reach another level? My simple argument is no. You could just as easily hand the reins over to Bradshaw. And look, the Flyers organization is going to have to decide at some point. Are they fine with Torts being Torts, or are they going to finally step in and be his boss? At some point, is somebody going to remind him that he works for the organization doesn't work for him? Is that going to happen or not? Because there have been some things where I've sat back and said, I don't know, that feels like more of a Torts move than it does a Danny and Jonesy move. That feels more like the coach kind of trying to have his way when the organization doesn't think it's a great idea. Jet Lutsenko stands out. Lutsenko made the roster to start the season because the coaching staff wanted him here, not because Briere and Jones thought it was best for the organization. Not because they thought that it was best for the long-term development of the player to have him here and maybe give him a look and then potentially burn a year of his ELC. They knew all along he was going to get sent down. And maybe they felt like he earned it out of camp. But he was here primarily because the coaching staff fought for Jet Lutsenko to start here. Now it hasn't adversely impacted him. And we'll see how Jet Lutsenko looks at World Junior. But the point still stands. There are times where I look at moves this team makes and I go, why does the coach have so much influence, so much impact on the decision? And by the way, it is organizational malpractice at this point to have 3 goalies up at the NHL level. It is something I cannot wrap my head around. It's not something I can justify. It's not something that makes any sense to me, okay? There is no world in which the Flyers should be carrying 3 goalies. They have made it very clear. Sam Erson's their number 1, even though he's played horribly since coming back off of IR. Alexei Kolosov is their number 2. That is their belief, and that Fedotov is their number 3. They apparently don't want to put Fedotov on waivers because they're worried that another team might pick him up, even though he has not the best contract. They don't want to put him on waivers right now, I guess out of fear that another team's going to snag him. And Kolosov, they don't want to send down. Is it because they're afraid that he's going to try to force his way back to the KHL? Is he going to flee the country to Belarus again? If that's the case, that's a problem because now you're being leveraged by a young kid who isn't an elite prospect. Zavragan, who made an amazing, 5-star, 5-bell save today. You should look at it. It's on Twitter. He looks like a stud. He's 19. Maybe he just turned 20. He looks incredible in the KHL. He's probably your best goalie prospect. And this team has a bunch of goalie prospects in the pipeline. And all I'll point out to you is that maybe now's not the time to live and die with whether or not Alexei Kolosov wants to go back or not. And if Fedotov is really your number 3 and you don't think that there's a path here to him getting actual playing time up here, send him down to Lehigh Valley. There have been rumors of a conditioning stint. So they can kind of keep him here, but they can send him out for conditioning. They can get him some more games at Lehigh Valley. Then do that. Do something. Emil Andre didn't play particularly well before he got sent down. But there, to me, is no reason why Emil Andre deserved to go down if for no other reason they want to carry 3 goalies. What are we doing? Somebody mentioned that in the comments earlier today on the show. And that actually reminds me, there was somebody, it was a Flyer spin doctor, earlier in the show. I said I was going to come back to this. Said, why should we trust the Flyers organization's judge of talent when they chose Bonk over Perreault, fans pick, and Jet over Bouillon, fans pick? Seems like we were right and they were wrong again. If you want to extend it, you could have the argument about Cole Caulfield getting passed over. Ooh, excuse me. Cole Caulfield getting passed over and the Flyers taking Cam York. York might be a good player. We don't know. But Caulfield looks like a good young goal scorer. And he would certainly be somebody that would take a little bit of pressure off of the need for Matvei Michkov to perform at the level that he does. He would look good. And that wasn't something that's revisionist history. People were screaming up and down that Caulfield was the better player than York. And it might prove to be true and it might prove to be wrong. But as of right now, I would rather have a young, good winger that can put up 30 goals a year than I would. I'm not sure what Cam York is yet. He had a really good stretch early in the season. Do I think Cam York is like a bona fide top pair defenseman right now? No. Do I think he's like an adequate second pair guy? Maybe. I just don't know yet. I'm going to go over to the comments here and then move on out because there are a lot of things that I have to get to today. But I want to make sure that we do due diligence here and we go chat with the people. So let me go out to the comments here and see what we can get about the Flyers. And then I have a little announcement, and I saw the person checked in here in the comments, so I'm going to make sure that we get to that as well. Let's see. Chris Freed says, Russ, can you put a curse on Drysdale like you did on Ryan Ellis? A couple of good games after the trade, you went full bandwagon on them. Then what happened? Yeah, maybe I should do that. We also have the fine folks checking in over on saying, where's it at? Joe Papel says, exactly, Russ, Gauthier and Michkov should be teammates. It was a failure to not be able to like figure out a way to get the kid to play for the Flyers. And right now it looks like a failure because the guy they traded him for, Jamie Drysdale, doesn't look particularly good either. Tony Louis says, Michkov hasn't been playing well lately, but hopefully the Christmas break was enough time to get Michkov the breather he needs. Maybe. Who knows? He hasn't looked great at even strength all year. He was dynamic on the power play. It doesn't mean that he's a failure. It doesn't mean that his drop-off has been precipitous. It just means that the young kid is starting to look like a young kid playing his first year in the NHL. Would it be nice if the Flyers had an actual center to play him with? Yeah, that would be great. Did they go out and get that guy in the offseason? No. Do I think it's a failure that they didn't get for him for his rookie year? No. But you better find one for next year. You can't have like a Morgan Frost adjacent player being Michkov's center next year. You just can't. Like at some point, then you're starting to run into the Claude Giroux of it all, where it's like, oh, you have this really talented guy and you're not surrounding him with very talented players. Michael over on YouTube says, fact, when they were winning in November, it wasn't due to the power play. And then he also notes that Torts is making an excuse for anything but Rocky Thompson being fired in Philly. Flyers Spin Doctor says, Flyers organization, Cutter, you have to earn it here. Also Flyers, can I carry your bags, Matvey Michkov? Alexei, okay, we'll carry 3 goalies. New era of Orange. Draft kids like Knubel. Draft Flyers over talent, Jet, and Bonk. We'll talk about this next week because there's more to get into there. Joe Papel, using my line here, but has coached the Flyers in hockey purgatory. Torts has. It's my fear. It's been my fear. It feels like, once again, they are going to play this game where they're going to remain a bubble-ish team. The league as a whole is bad. There's a lot of parity, and a lot of the worst teams in the league are going to finish probably within 9 or so points of each other. Like, your worst team in the league might end up being significantly farther behind everyone else, but like picks 3 through 9, let's say, that might only be like a 9-point gap. And that matters because if you are coaching up guys and you're picking up an occasional 2 extra points, 1 point here, 1 point there, an overtime loss there, a shootout loss there, that matters. And the difference between picking at number 9 and picking at number 3 or picking at number 4 is big. And also the difference between having that pick and then maybe being able to parlay another pick or 2 or another young player or 2 for another draft pick, a higher pick, move up in the draft, perhaps move those picks in a package with a young player and get back into the top 15 in the draft. Like, all those things are in play if you're picking higher. Let's see. Flyer Spin Doctor says, Rocky saw Matvey Michkov help the Flyers score 8 power play goals in the first 8 games by being low by the goal line and said, enough of that. It's true. I mean, he was willing to get into the dirty areas that seemingly no one else is. Linda Joseph says, the new era of orange, same as the old era of orange. That's rough. If it proves to be true, if they pick in hockey purgatory again, like, you're not going to hear me say nice glowing things. Although I think I'm pretty fair on the Flyers. Like, I'm not thrilled with the direction right now. Yukon 456 says Michkov's tough. Torts can't hurt him. Mich will just get tougher. There was an interview. I'll see if I can break it down for next week. It was done in Russian, but it was a former Torts player saying that he thinks that Michkov is going to be able to like get through the Torts trying times, and that Torts might end up helping Michkov develop as a pro. Landros 2 says, every rookie hits a wall, well, almost every rookie. Torts needs to let him work with him. To this point, he has. UConn also wants Jet back up here. You won't see that this year, but next year I think he'll make the team. Flyer Spin Doctor says you can't find a number that says Andre deserved to be sent down or wasn't one of the top 3 defensemen on the team. Torts, no-brainer, too full of himself. The eye test would tell you that Emile Andre struggled a bit before he went down. The analytics would say that he was playing perfectly fine hockey. I like to find somewhere in the middle. Do I think he deserved to be sent down? No. Do I think that they could have sent him to the press box for a game or two? Yeah. And that might have been okay. Maybe they think that they're going to play him in Lehigh Valley, top pair minutes or more consistent games. Like, I don't know. I don't think Emile Andre was a problem. Michael says the problem is that they aren't his boss, meaning Briere and Jones. He reports to Hilferty, as per the structure announcement a few years ago. No evidence that Danny or Keith have authority over him. I don't know. Don't know. Flyer Spin Doctor also says Jet is going to disappoint a lot of people because of Flyers. If you watch him last night, dude is allergic to offense. We'll see how he does in World Juniors. I'm not going to overreact to his performance there, but we should have an idea. We'll get a better idea of what he is relative to other players in his age bracket against what I would say is probably tougher competition. Landro says that Luchenko was in a bit of a funk going into World Juniors, and he still looks like it. Tony Lewis says, why is Lawton still here other than being a big brother to guys? Why didn't they trade Ristolainen when his value was at an all-time high recently? It seems like Briere has been trigger shy lately. So there's that idea out there that like a lot of GMs right now have been planting seeds for the deadline. And I will simply point out that there are other teams that have executed trades. I get into these fights all the time on Snow the Goalie. And honestly, it's gotten to a point where it's just so annoying and burdensome to make these points. But like my big mantra, and I'm going to continue to encourage Flyers fans to just join me on this journey. Lower the ceiling, lower the floor. Or lower the floor, lower the ceiling. What does that mean? John Tortorella raises your floor. He takes you from being like, let's say, a 50-point team to a 58-point team because he's going to coach the hell out of guys and they're going to play scared. And so he's going to raise the very least that the team can do. He also kind of raises their ceiling because if things break the right way, if you galvanize the team going on a late playoff run, it's possible that he could raise your ceiling, could take you into being a playoff team when you don't expect it. The Scott Laughtons of the world shouldn't be here. Moving Scott Laughton doesn't really affect your ceiling. Like your maximum points that you can get with him isn't going to be like, he's not going to take you like 12 points to the promised land, but he can lower the floor. Like if Laughton goes away, it makes the team worse. It doesn't necessarily change much about their trajectory. It doesn't change them from being a playoff bubble team to being like absolutely out of it, but it certainly takes them from being like middle of the pack to lowering it a little bit. So he lowers your floor. In doing so, I guess it kind of lowers your ceiling, at least a little bit. Rasmus Ristolainen would lower both because without Risto's played very well this year. If you lose Risto, there's going to be a cascading effect, and it will fundamentally. Risto, of all the guys who could be on the block, is the guy who probably impacts this team the most if he's dealt. Because it will take them out of being a potential playoff bubble team, and it will certainly lower the amount of points that they would get at the very minimum, because you'll see it have really negative ramifications on the goalies. It'll send a similar effect to when the Flyers traded Walker last year and what it does to the other defensive pairings on the team. It would throw the team into some kind of chaos. And I've been very down on Risto's game in recent years, but like it's hard to deny that he's had a good season for this team. So again, lower the floor, lower the ceiling. Take what your worst case scenario and your best case scenario as a team is, drop the points at the same time. Move Laughton, move Risto. You want to trade Frost in a hockey trade 1-for-1? Have at it. Somebody comes and offers you something good for Joel Farabee? Have at it. I don't think they're going to make 4 trades. I don't think they're going to trade 4 guys. I think they should trade 3 by the deadline. But that's where I'm at. I'm on record with this. My wife checks in, says, can we just lace up Bundy and see what happens? I'd pay to see Torts yell at him. I would love to see what happens if Torts yells at Bundy. And I would love to see what happens with it. Although I think Bundy now is a much more level-headed guy than he was as a player. So maybe Bundy wouldn't give it back to him quite the same, but it would be funny. AJ Snap says, only a 9-point gap, you say. Rangers are about to accept that challenge. I don't know what's going on with the Rangers. It's not good. It's not good. And remember, if AJ wins, he wins a Rangers jersey. That he's put that on record. So we gotta be careful. He can't win. Can't win. Landro says they just recalled Lixell, so there's that. Great. Landros notes, but Russ, that's what a rebuilding team does. Yes, they trade players to get worse, to lower their ceiling and lower their floor, and ensure that they don't end up picking in hockey purgatory. That's what a rebuilding team is supposed to do. That is not what the Flyers did last year, and it's certainly not what the Flyers have done so far this year. We'll see. Maybe they'll turn around. They're not. I have a bad feeling that they're going to do the same thing. Tony Louis says, that's good if they get worse in the short term and get picks for guys like Risto and Lawton. Commit to a direction instead of being stuck in purgatory. And this is what I keep coming back to. When I argue on Snow the Goalie with Ant, who gets very, very upset, he just can't wrap his head around it. When I get upset with him, or he gets upset with me, he thinks that I'm saying the Flyers need to go back and they need to be Sam Hinkie Sixers, which I've said many times. It doesn't work in hockey the same way that it does in basketball. The direct impact of a rookie in basketball versus hockey is significant. In the NBA, 5 guys on the court at a time, you are probably going to play 11 guys on any given night. And when the playoffs come around, it's like 9, right? Coaches shorten their rotations. They shorten the bench. In hockey, that's not the case. You got 4 lines. You have 3 defensive pairings. If you're Flyers, you carry 3 goalies. It's just fun. It's fun that way. It's unpredictable. It's in vogue. The impact of a young hockey player versus young basketball player is not even close. And my whole thing is when you're rebuilding, put yourself in position to get one of the guys that's perceived to be a no-brainer or to be a guy who could be a franchise cornerstone. You don't usually find them at pick number 15. Now, you can make the argument that you have to get one of those guys at number 1. The Flyers haven't had a number 1 pick, right? They had the bad luck of James Aaron Riemsdyk instead of Patrick Kane. They had the bad luck of Nolan Patrick's concussion issues. He was going to be, I think, a good player. I don't think the motor was going to be there. I don't know if it would have worked in Philly, but that didn't work out for them. They, I still think, reached for Jet Lashenko this year. The fact that he made the lineup on opening night doesn't mean Jack diddly squat to me because the coach wanted it. We'll see if he ends up turning into a real stud and a diamond in the rough kind of guy. I don't know if he will. And then we come back to, you had Matvei Michkov who fell to 7, and had he been American or Canadian or their geopolitical situation in Russia hadn't been what it was, he probably would have been the number 2 overall pick in the draft. So you could say that was good draft luck. But you still need another one of those guys. You're not going to get it by picking at 15 every year or picking at 14. You need another top 5 guy. And if you end up this season drafting it let's say number 14, even though you have 3 first-round picks, 14 is not getting you into the top 5. Now, there's no guarantee that if you get the 7th pick, that trading 7 and 1 or both of those other picks gets you into the top 5, but there's a chance. And if there is another player in that top 5 that you're convinced is a generational talent or could be a franchise cornerstone to pair with Matvei Michkov, I'd much rather be in pick number 7 and have the flexibility to move up or down in that spot than pick at number 15 and take a chance. One of the things that Ant and I got into recently, as I said, I'd rather pick at 7 than 15. And then he went very narrow focus and was like, well, let's look at who got picked at number 7 and who got picked at 15. It's not that. It's that your first, you have a much better group of players that you could choose from at number 7. You have your choice as opposed to hoping somebody good falls to you at 15. It's also about the flexibility to potentially move up in the draft. And it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get into the top 5 or the top 3. But you are in a much stronger position to make a deal on draft day, to move up in the draft. Just saying, at number 7 versus number 15. All right, I'm done. I'm done for now. Now, I do have good news. C-Mac over here says, Saravalli predicted that York, Risto, and Frost all get traded by the deadline. I don't think they're going to trade York. I really don't. I don't think it's going to happen. Mr. Twister says, if the goaltending keeps up, they might accidentally pick high without trying. That is true. Possible. Linda Joseph says, the screaming you hear from Delco is Ant. If you heard somebody saying you're an idiot, you're a buffoon, you're a dope, it's either Howard Eskin or it's Anthony Sanfilippo. One of them is yelling it right now. Okay. I have a little bit of news here before we head out. Now, I'll be back on Monday. We're going to do the redrawing. If Kevin Motz doesn't claim the jersey by Sunday by DMing me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or emailing me, Russ at joymediallc.com, or sending a carrier pigeon. We'll do the redrawing on Monday for the Drive to 500 subscribers. There is an exciting development that some of you might have seen on Twitter, and that is we finally found a video guy. We finally found somebody. I say we. It's really me. Finally found a video guy who I believe is going to form a cohesive plan. We've already talked about it. And he has kind of laid out the vision that we're going to grow this channel. We're going to grow this show. We're going to do some work as well over with Snow the Goalie. It's now going to make me do It's Just Wrestling once a week. So if you're a pro wrestling fan, it's starting in the new year. Every Thursday morning at the same time, 8:30, we'll be doing It's Just Wrestling over on that YouTube channel. Link in the description of the episode, wherever you get this podcast or this show on YouTube. Amadeo Gracia. He's been working with our good friend Broads, friend of the show, and now he's going to be coming over and working to help grow this channel and to go help grow the Joy Media channels as well. So that's Snow the Goalie. That's It's Just Wrestling. That's the Russ Joy Show. And I've also been told there's a possibility that another show could be joining Joy Media at some point soon. Perhaps in the new year. It won't have me on it, but they might be joining the Joy Media cinematic universe, the extended universe, the JMEU. JMU. Anyway, big things coming in 2025 for Joy Media. But I'm really looking forward to having somebody who will help me and help raise the profile of this show and take it to a whole other level. And if that happens, my friends, that means that all those giveaways that I've been talking about, that 1,000 subscriber giveaway that could have to do with tickets, that might happen a lot sooner than you expect. And perhaps some more of those giveaways that I kind of have planned out as being longer term, perhaps they become much more short term if we grow this channel even faster. And I think with his help, we'll get there. So a big thank you to all of you who tuned in live. A big thank you to everybody who listens after the fact in the podcast feed. To those of you who find the show on YouTube, X, or Facebook after the fact, and you still watch the show even though you can't participate in the live comments. But a big, big, big thank you to everybody who supported the show this year. I'll be back on Monday. We're kind of take a look, a retrospective look at 2024. We'll break down the Eagles-Dallas game. But I have to be honest, unless something horrible happens, knock on wood that it doesn't, I have no juice for the Dallas game this week. I just don't. But we'll talk about what's going on. But I think it's going to be more of a retrospective, a look back at 2024, the best and the worst of 2024 in Philadelphia sports. And I hope you'll join me on Monday's show. In the meantime, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Kevin Motz, if you're out there, you might want to make sure that you reach out to yours truly, okay? Make sure that you reach out to yours truly somehow and claim the jersey. Otherwise, Monday, we will be doing a redrawing for the Drive to 500 jersey giveaway. So I want to thank all of you, and I will talk to all of you on Monday. This has been the Russ Joy Show. I've been Russ Joy, but you already knew that because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll talk to you Monday morning, bright and early.